Let me ask you something. Why does everything feel more expensive over time? Why do interest rates go up suddenly, making loans harder to afford? And why do some countries grow fast while others lag for years? These aren't random events. They're part of a larger system, the economy. Understanding this system can be one of the most valuable skills you develop because it changes how you see money, work, and the world. Today, we'll break down macroeconomics, something that sounds complex, but is actually very logical once you see the big picture. Before you worry about jargon, let me stop you. This isn't about memorizing definitions. It's about understanding how the economy really works. Once you get this, economic news stops feeling confusing, and your financial decisions start making sense. Most people go through life reacting to the economy without understanding what's actually happening. They feel prices rising, hear headlines about inflation or recessions, and make financial decisions based on fear, confusion, or emotion. But once you understand the mechanics underneath, the world starts looking very different. Part 1. What macroeconomics really is. Macroeconomics studies the economy as a whole. Millions of people, thousands of businesses, and countless decisions interacting at once. Compare it with microeconomics, which focuses on small pieces. Why a price changes, how a company sets strategy, or how supply and demand work in one market. Macro looks at the bigger picture. Why are prices rising everywhere? Why is unemployment increasing? Why is the entire economy slowing down? It's about patterns, not details. And this is the part many people miss. Individual events often look random up close. A company failing, layoffs increasing, prices jumping. But at the macro level, these events are usually connected by larger economic forces moving underneath the surface. Think of it like studying a forest instead of individual trees. You see how it grows, changes, and reacts over time. For example, you notice coffee prices going up. Microeconomics explains a single store's pricing. Macro explains why coffee, rent, and gas all rise together. During periods of high inflation, people often blame individual companies for greed. But when prices rise across almost everything at the same time, it usually signals a much bigger force affecting the entire economy. Part 2. The economy as a system. The economy works like a loop. Everything is connected. Businesses produce goods and services. They pay wages to workers. Workers spend their income on goods and services. This spending drives more production. This circular flow, production to income to spending to production, shows how each part affects the others. If one part slows down, the whole system feels it. Less production leads to less income, leads to less spending, leads to production slows further. That interconnectedness is what makes economies powerful during growth and dangerous during crises. A shock in one area can spread faster than most people expect. Understanding this loop helps explain recessions, recoveries, and why policy decisions can speed up or slow down the economy. You saw this clearly during the 2008 financial crisis. Problems that started inside the housing market eventually spread into banks, businesses, jobs, consumer spending, and then the global economy itself. One broken part of the system triggered reactions everywhere else. You saw a more recent version of this during COVID-19. Factories slowed down, shipping became disrupted, businesses faced shortages, governments injected massive stimulus, and suddenly, prices around the world started rising together. A health crisis quickly became an economic shock affecting billions of people. Part 3. The key players. The economy revolves around three main players: households. Individuals earn income by working, decide how to spend or save it, and their collective spending drives overall demand in the economy. Businesses. Companies choose what to produce, how many people to hire, and where to invest. Their decisions depend on consumer demand, market conditions, and future expectations. Government collects taxes, provides public services, and invests in infrastructure. It can stimulate the economy during downturns or slow it during periods of overheating. When all three are active, the economy grows. If one pulls back, the system weakens. For example, during COVID-19, households spent less, businesses reduced production, and governments injected stimulus to maintain the flow. For a while, those stimulus programs helped prevent economic collapse. But later, many economists argued that massive stimulus combined with supply shortages also contributed to inflation surging worldwide. Part 4. Inflation, the silent force. Inflation isn't just things are expensive. It's the rise in prices over time, which reduces the purchasing power of money. For example, $100 today may buy fewer goods next year if prices increase. Even if your income stays the same, your money effectively buys less. For example, if inflation averages 7% per year, something that costs $100 today would cost about $197 in just 10 years. That means the purchasing power of your money could almost be cut in half within a decade. Inflation shapes behavior. People adjust spending, businesses change pricing strategies, and governments and central banks act to maintain stability. Understanding inflation is crucial because it directly affects savings, debt, and everyday spending. Imagine keeping $10,000 in cash while inflation stays high for years. The number in your account may not change, but what that money can actually buy steadily shrinks over time. In extreme cases, very high inflation can severely destabilize an economy by eroding confidence in the currency and disrupting normal pricing mechanisms. Argentina has experienced both periods of hyperinflation and chronic high inflation, during which people often rush to spend or convert money quickly to avoid losing purchasing power. Part 5. Where inflation comes from. Inflation doesn't happen randomly, and this is where many public debates become oversimplified. People often search for one villain: corporations, governments, consumers, or central banks. But inflation is usually the result of multiple forces interacting at the same time. There are 4 main drivers. Demand pull. When people want more goods than the economy can produce, prices rise. Cost push. When production costs increase, businesses raise prices to maintain profits. Money supply. If too much money is in circulation without corresponding production, each unit loses value. Expectations. If people anticipate price increases, their behavior, buying more now, raising wages, can actually cause prices to rise. Inflation can become self-reinforcing, creating cycles that affect the entire economy. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Businesses raise prices because they expect higher costs. Workers demand higher wages because they expect higher prices. And those reactions can push inflation even further. Part 6. Inflation and your money. Inflation affects how you save, spend, and borrow. Here's the uncomfortable reality. If your savings grow slower than inflation, you're effectively losing money even though the number in your bank account is increasing. Cash loses value over time, making savings weaker if not invested. If inflation is 8%, and your savings account earns only 2%, your real purchasing power is effectively shrinking by about 6% per year. Fixed-rate debt can become easier to repay in real terms, while variable borrowing costs can rise with inflation. For example, imagine borrowing money at a fixed 3% interest rate before inflation suddenly rises to 8%. In real terms, the value of what you repay becomes smaller over time because prices and wages may rise faster than your loan payments. Understanding these effects helps you make better financial decisions and protect your wealth. This is one reason investors often move into assets like stocks, real estate, or commodities during inflationary periods. They're trying to protect purchasing power before cash loses more value. Part 7. Government and fiscal policy. Governments influence the economy through spending and taxation. At first, Expansionary policies often feel great. More spending can boost jobs, markets, and consumer confidence. But there's a hidden risk. If governments stimulate too aggressively for too long, inflation and debt problems can start building underneath the surface. Expansionary policy. Spending more or cutting taxes stimulates economic activity. During economic crises, governments sometimes inject trillions of dollars into the economy to prevent mass unemployment and collapsing demand. These actions can stabilize the system quickly, but they can also create inflationary pressure later. Contractionary policy. Reducing spending or raising taxes slows the economy to prevent overheating. There's a trade-off. Prolonged deficits increase debt, which can become a long-term risk if not managed carefully. This tension creates one of the hardest challenges in economics, solving short-term pain without creating bigger long-term problems later. Part 8. Central banks and interest rates. Now we get to one of the most powerful institutions in the modern economy, central banks. A single interest rate decision can influence borrowing, investing, hiring, housing prices, stock markets, and even unemployment levels across entire countries. Central banks aim to keep inflation under control and ensure economic stability. Interest rates are their main tool. High rates reduce borrowing and spending, slowing the economy. Imagine taking a mortgage when interest rates are 3% versus 8%. Even if the house price stays the same, the monthly payment can become dramatically more expensive, which is why housing markets often slow sharply when rates rise. Low rates encourage borrowing and spending, stimulating growth. Low interest rates can feel amazing in the short term. Cheap loans fuel spending, businesses expand faster, and markets often surge. But what happens next can become dangerous. Excessive borrowing and speculative bubbles can begin forming underneath the optimism. These decisions affect not only loans but also investment, housing, and business expansion. You saw this dramatically in the United States after years of near-zero interest rates. When rates later rose aggressively to fight inflation, borrowing became far more expensive almost overnight, and markets reacted immediately. In some countries, monthly loan payments increased by hundreds or even thousands of dollars for households with variable rate debt. For many families, macroeconomics suddenly became personal. Part 9. Markets and interest rates. Interest rates influence entire financial markets. And this is the part many beginner investors underestimate. Markets are heavily driven by liquidity, how easy money is to access throughout the economy. When interest rates stay near zero for years, money becomes extremely cheap to borrow. Investors often take more risk, pushing stock prices, crypto, and real estate much higher. But when rates rise quickly, those same markets can fall just as fast. Low rates, stocks often rise, real estate becomes more attractive. High rates, borrowing costs increase, investors move to safer assets like bonds. When money becomes expensive, risk suddenly feels less attractive. Companies slow expansion, consumers reduce spending, and investors become much more cautious almost immediately. Understanding this helps you see why market trends react to central bank decisions. Part 10. Global economy, currencies, and trade. No economy exists in isolation. Modern economies are deeply interconnected. A recession, supply chain disruption, or policy change in one major country can ripple across the entire world economy surprisingly fast. Countries trade goods, services, and capital, and currency values affect competitiveness. Strong currency leads to cheaper imports, harder exports. For consumers, a strong currency can make foreign products and travel feel cheaper. But for domestic exporters, it can make competing internationally much harder. Weak currency leads to more competitive exports, costlier imports. This is why currency weakness often hits ordinary people through higher prices on imported goods like electronics, fuel, food, or medicine. Turkey experienced this problem dramatically during periods of severe currency weakness, where imported goods became far more expensive and inflation accelerated rapidly. Part 11. Capital flows and risk. Money moves across borders for return and safety. Capital can move incredibly fast in modern markets. Investors may spend years putting money into a country and pull billions out within days if confidence suddenly disappears. Investors seek higher profits, but also stability. Political instability, economic mismanagement, or natural disasters can drive capital away, affecting investment, currency value, and growth. This is why trust matters so much in economics. Once investors believe a country is unstable, restoring confidence can take years. Part 12. GDP, the economic scoreboard. GDP, or gross domestic product, measures the total value of all goods and services produced in a country over a period, usually a year. Think of GDP as the economy's scoreboard. It doesn't tell you everything about people's lives or happiness, but it gives a broad picture of whether economic activity is expanding or shrinking. Nominal GDP includes price changes. It can rise due to inflation alone. Real GDP adjusts for inflation, showing true growth. GDP per capita divides GDP by population, providing a rough measure of average living standards. For example, if a country's GDP grows 5%, but its population also grows rapidly, the average improvement in living standards may be much smaller than the headline number suggests. Following GDP trends shows whether an economy is expanding, stagnating, or contracting, giving you perspective beyond daily news. But here's something important many people misunderstand. A growing GDP does not automatically mean every individual is becoming wealthier. Economic growth can still be unevenly distributed. Part 13. Economic cycles. Economies move in cycles. Expansion. Jobs grow, spending increases. Slowdown/recession. Spending falls. Unemployment rises. Recovery. Growth resumes, jobs return. And this is where emotions become dangerous. During expansions, people often believe growth will continue forever. During recessions, many believe recovery will never come. Both assumptions are usually wrong. You can see this psychology repeatedly in financial bubbles. During boom periods, many investors convince themselves that this time is different, right before markets reverse sharply. Understanding these patterns helps you make informed financial decisions rather than reacting emotionally. Investors who panic during downturns often lock in losses at the worst possible moment, while those who understand economic cycles are usually better prepared psychologically. Part 14. Why this matters to you. You don't need to predict the economy perfectly. You do need to understand it. Once you see the patterns, economic news stops feeling confusing. Your decisions about saving, investing, and spending become clearer. You begin to see how your money connects to the bigger system. The economy isn't something happening out there. It's the environment you live in. The better you understand it, the more control you have over your financial future. Because once you understand the forces shaping the economy, you stop feeling like everything happening around you is random. And that shift alone can completely change how you approach money, investing, and long-term decisions. So here's how you actually use this in real life. Not in theory, but in decisions you make with your money. 1. Inflation rule. Cash versus time. If inflation is around 5 to 10%, holding large amounts of cash long-term is a losing position. A simple benchmark. If your money in savings earns less than inflation, your real wealth is shrinking. So instead of asking, how safe is my money? You should also ask, is my money growing faster than prices? 2. Interest rate rule. Debt timing. When interest rates are rising, borrowing becomes more expensive not just today, but for years ahead. Practical rule. High rates lead to avoid new long-term variable debt. Low rates lead to debt becomes cheaper in real terms, but risk of overborrowing increases. Example, a 1 to 2% change in mortgage rates can increase total repayment by tens of percent over time. 3. Emergency buffer rule cycles. Economic cycles are predictable even if timing is not. So the practical response is simple. Always maintain 3 to 6 months of essential expenses in liquid savings. Why? Because recessions don't destroy wealth instantly. They destroy income first. 4. Recession behavior rule. In downturns, most people do the wrong thing at the wrong time. They panic sell, they stop investing completely, they lock in losses emotionally. Practical rule. During recessions, your priority is not max returns. It is survival plus consistency. The people who keep investing consistently during downturns usually benefit most during recovery. 5. Inflation protection rule, asset logic. If inflation is persistent, holding only cash is not a strategy. It's exposure. Practical alternatives, productive assets, business equities, real assets, real estate, commodities. You don't need to time markets. You need to avoid being fully exposed to money-losing purchasing power. 6. Central bank awareness rule, timing awareness. When central banks raise interest rates aggressively, credit tightens, markets usually become more volatile, borrowing slows down economy-wide. Practical response. This is usually a period to reduce financial risk, not increase it. 7. Simple decision framework. Before any major financial decision, ask 3 questions. Are interest rates high or low right now? Is inflation accelerating or slowing? Is the economy expanding or contracting? You don't need perfect answers. Even approximate awareness puts you ahead of most people financially. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe, because in the next videos, we'll break down how to actually use this knowledge for investing and building wealth. Until then, keep learning, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.